What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Slice of TV, where we are journeying through HBO's The Last of Us. I am your host, Brett Parker. Joining me is another guest from Cinema Trip Reviews, our good friend Wyatt.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, man.
Absolutely. It's always good to have you back. It's always good to bring on these different guests and have their own perspective of the show. And it's funny because we just talked about it before we started recording, but so you are knowledgeable about the games. You've played the games, as have I.
It's been a long time since I played that first one. But I remember bits and pieces, especially watching the show. I'm like, oh, it's all coming back to me now.
Yeah, but it's funny because, like, we both are knowledgeable about the games, and we are going to be talking about episode 3, titled Long, Long Time, which is an episode that deviates, at least so far, deviates the most from the game. It takes a little known character from the game and expands on that character very drastically from what we even when we met this character in the game, we really didn't get like the feeling that was what was going on, because I don't even think Neil Druckmann, when he wrote the game, that was the idea of it. This was kind of Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin's kind of brainchild when they created the show. But yeah, we'll go through this talking non-spoilers, and then we're gonna go full spoilers on it. So, Wyatt, what did you think of episode 3?
With as much as it deviated, I loved it, to be honest. I didn't really know what to expect because, unfortunately, normally I try to tune in as it premieres on Sunday nights, but I didn't get the chance this time. So I was trying to stay away from everything Monday before I watched it. But you got to see that. You see the headlines that are coming out. Like, it's so heartbreaking. You're gonna cry. And I'm like, oh great. What am I going to be, watching tonight? But I thoroughly enjoyed the whole episode. I know people have their issues with it. I know, like, the woke mobs out there talking about it, just like how they were with the games. But I mean, overall, I liked what they did with the story here, even though it did go a different direction from the games. But even within that first game, there's little hints and stuff that maybe this was there at some point. You just didn't see it, or you didn't hear much about it.
Oh, absolutely. It and we will be spoiling the character of Bill from the game as well. Like, we'll be I do want to talk about the game version of Bill compared to the Bill we see in this episode. But yeah, I loved it. I thought it was so well done. Because the thing is like, it could have just it felt like it could have been part of a completely different show, but they smoothly put in those elements to make sure that you're still in the Last of Us universe, that you're seeing other characters that kind of connect to this universe. But the performances are just fantastic. I mean,
top notch.
It's unbelievable that we get, like, Nick Offerman just absolutely kills it, along with Murray Bartlett, who plays Frank.
Yeah.
Their chemistry being kind of the complete opposites of each other. Like, one is, Bill is a very gruff, survivalist who just doesn't take any shit, and
loner too.
Yeah, does what he needs to do to survive. And then you have Frank, who is just kind of the free spirit, who even though the world is falling apart or has fallen apart, he still wants to live like there's nothing wrong. He still wants to create his own little utopia and just kind of not fully ignore the fact that the world's in shambles, but try to keep one little piece.
Some form of normalcy around. But with this type of thing, like, when you go and do an episode like this where it deviates from the main story, I feel like with any other show, whether it be like, not even just zombie specific, but like The Walking Dead, if you go too far away from that narrative, it's hard to keep people, locked in for that whole episode. But like you said, I think the performances and just the overall arc with these characters, just for this one episode, I think it worked perfectly. I was locked in the whole time.
Oh yeah. I mean, it definitely was great the way that they start the episode and then the way that they ended it, where it wasn't you fully meeting Bill right off the bat, because then you'd be like, well, who is this character? Even though you do hear his name you hear both Bill and Frank's name in episode 2, kind of at the
Mhm.
end. You don't really know who they are, where you kind of get a little bit of a backstory from Joel before you're fully engrossed into who Bill is and kind of what he had to do to survive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love the direction they went with this, and like you mentioned before, I don't know if you ever watched the show. It was another HBO show called The Leftovers. I've only saw, like,
I've
the
heard of
first
it. I know what it's
season.
about, but I never got into it.
Yeah, I've only seen the first season, but they kinda did a similar thing where it's like you have the main characters, but every couple episodes, you would kind of focus in on just one, maybe side character for the whole episode, and they would have, like, kind of their own little arc. And it just kinda reminded me a little bit of that, and it's just weird that it's another HBO show. I mean,
Right.
I'm not sure if, like, any of the writers were associated with that show or not, but it definitely reminded me of that. But I like the way that they kind of are doing, like, taking some of the same beats from the game, but they're doing different things with them a little bit. It's
Yeah.
keeping it fresh for the people that know exactly or expecting what's going to happen coming up next. I mean, we all know what's going to happen, but how is it going to happen?
Right. And it's definitely good to see that the people are appreciating the fact that they are deviating so far from the game, especially with this episode. As we said, like, they have taken aspects of the story and kind of changed it, tweaked it to make sense to, and not just make sense to what we're seeing on screen, but to give it more of longevity, like to give it a longer story. Because if you were to just go beat for beat fully from the game, it's not going to be a very long show.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you follow the exact way the game was,
Yeah.
I feel like it would be kind of weird for this type of for this episode. I mean,
Yeah.
you're just meeting this character straight off, and he would be an asshole from the. I mean, that's the way he kind of is in the games, but I don't know. I just like the direction they went with this as opposed to what you see. I mean, I don't know if do you want to get into, like, the way the game is now, or you want to
Oh yeah.
wait a
Well,
little bit.
yeah. Let's we got nothing more to say that's not going to spoil this, so we're going to hop right into spoilers. So if you haven't seen episode 3 yet of The Last of Us, please go check it out. I mean, you shouldn't even be here if you haven't watched the show. Make sure to do that.
Yeah,
So let's
100%.
let's
Check it
spoil
out.
this thing. Let's go. All right,
Okay.
go
Yeah, I
ahead,
mean, in
Wyatt.
the games, you way you meet Bill is just because Ellie and Joel are just wandering through, like, a little town trying to find resources or whatever. But they end up getting, a big horde of clickers that are coming after them. They're getting attacked, and then Bill comes in and helps them out, and they're running through all his different traps and everything from what I remember. And you
Yep.
see that a lot in this episode is him setting up all these different booby traps outside of his perimeter, and he has, like, the fence and everything. Um, you do have that. He does mention Frank, and there is a little bit of, like, a little side note about it in the game,
Yeah.
but they don't really go into detail at all. And the letter you see in the game is far different than the letter you see in the show here.
Oh yeah. It's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you meet Bill is, I think the Bill you see in the game and Nick Offerman's version of Bill are vastly different. Nick Offerman's Bill
Oh,
is
yeah.
he's a loner. He keeps to himself. He doesn't like conversing with people. Like, the only person that he enjoyed talking to was Frank, and that was his love. That was the person that he would lay down his life for. Even though before that he was kind of just like, it's me and nobody else. In the game, it's a little bit different. He's kind of like, he's very vocal. He will talk to you,
Yeah.
but he's a dick. He's gonna voice his opinions on thing. It doesn't care what comes out of his mouth. Him and Ellie in the game go
Yeah.
at it a couple times, which is pretty funny.
That's what I
But
was going to say. It was probably some of the best scenes is that banter between them
yeah,
back and forth.
and I think it would have been fun to see a little bit of that in the show, but I do understand what the direction they went to, and it was a bigger impact at the end of the episode, the way that they ended it.
Yeah. I was going to say the message that you get from the game is completely opposite from the message you get from the show
Yeah.
from here. Whereas, like, in the game, like, Bill tells Joel, like, she's gonna, like, be the death of you. Like, you can't rely on and try to protect everybody. Whereas the show, it's like you gotta try to protect anybody you can. Find that
Yeah.
one person that means the world to you. I don't know. It's just completely different messages, and especially, like we mentioned, the letter and everything. But, like, in the game, they got, from what I remember, they go to the school because they have to find the
Yeah.
battery, and that was the whole point of Joel going to Bill's, is trying to get that
Yep.
battery to get that truck and everything.
Yeah, and that's when you first encounter a bloater. which is
Yeah,
something we haven't seen in the show, which
it's been
is I'm
teased.
very excited to see what they, the design of the bloater in the show compared to the game.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's I liked it. I liked this episode a lot. I liked that, in the game they do talk about the fact like who was Frank? Oh, well, he was my partner. But you never really get like a full like was he just somebody like a friend who always was with him, or was it something more? You never got that. Well, Neil Druckmann,
Yeah.
who is an executive producer on the show as well, and also probably helps write the show, is like,
Yeah, he directed a couple of the episodes.
yeah, I know he directed episode 2. I'm not sure which ones he's going with next. But
Mhm.
yeah, he's like, let's just expand on that. Let's really open the door to who Bill really was. And so you see that Bill meets Frank, Frank falls into one of his traps,
Yeah.
and yeah, he invites him in and, cleans him up, gives him clothes and stuff, and then they kind of bond over playing the piano and playing this certain song, I guess that was a
The Linda Ronstadt.
yeah, which was to be honest, I've never heard of her. I, I was like, I feel like I should. I just don't know who this is. But it was cool
Yeah.
because it was like a song that was important to him because of his mom. And
Yeah.
so
Man, that was one of the scenes that got me too. There was a couple
yeah,
points in this episode that got some tears flowing, and that scene where like he kind of like not yells at him, but kind of gets on his case, like he's playing it wrong or whatever. And he's like, "Well, I'm not
yeah,
a professional either." But then he sits down, and the way he plays it, it's just so like I don't know. It just has that feel to it, and the way he's singing, it just has
yeah.
so much emotion behind it, and just that little scene with Nick Offerman, it's so great.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where Bill is a loner, as we said, and he doesn't, he's probably been doing this for a very long time, so he's closeted. He definitely wasn't somebody who was out there trying to find a guy to be with, and he was probably still
Yeah.
trying to figure out who the hell he was. So like meeting somebody who is the opposite of him, who is just, I mean, once the relationship starts to progress and they're about to sleep with each other for the first time, and I just love the fact that Frank's just like, I'm not a whore. So
I
you're
don't
gonna have
do
to
this
let you, yeah, I don't do this just
food.
for food or whatever. So you're gonna have to let me stay for a few more days. I thought that was great dialogue to add to that, to just
Yeah.
add a little bit more. But it also like just shows that Frank or Bill's trying to figure out who the hell he is, and it's like his first experience, like asking him about his experience, and he's like, I
Mhm.
did it with I did stuff with a girl a long time ago. Where it's like
Yeah.
he's like figuring out. I mean,
And
this is a man who's middle aged probably at this point.
yeah. And Frank knew too. Like
Oh yeah,
just some of that interaction leading up until that, like the piano scene, everything. Frank could tell there was something that, Bill wasn't letting off his chest. He's been kind of hiding deep down. He hasn't told anybody. And I mean, that bonding between them, it worked really well. And I feel like leading up to all this, even myself, playing the games and everything, you're not sure who this character is. And
yeah,
like watching this with my fiance, she's like, I don't trust him. I don't trust this guy, this Frank guy. And I was like, you know what? I don't know what direction they're going with. So it's
right.
like, maybe he can turn on him. Who's this going to be to Bill? But I love the direction they went, because it's interesting to see the Bill we talked about in the game, and then you see this in the show where he did have like the love of his life here, and you get
Yeah,
to see that whole relationship over the span of like 20 years.
yeah, yeah. Because talking about the game version, in the game, we're also spoiling game, everybody. So if you haven't played the game, don't listen to this what I'm about to say. But in the game, Bill, they see Frank. He's hanging in the house, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, what the hell happened to Frank?" And he's like, pretty much their relationship was nothing like the relationship she in the show. They were very toxic towards each other. They didn't. Frank really didn't like Bill because Bill was probably just not a very good person, and Frank was just like, "I'm done with this. I don't want to be part of this world," and ended up, offing himself.
Well, he was bit too, he said. From
Oh,
what I
okay, yeah,
remember.
that's right.
Yeah,
And
because
so,
Bill's like he had bite marks here, here, and here. But
yeah.
yeah, he just went off and he killed himself. But like the note he leaves behind is vastly different from the one in the
Oh
show,
yeah,
because the note's just saying like how much he hated his guts and how much he resented being there all this time.
yeah.
And it's like, geez.
which is a
which I
huge
thought was going
difference
to
from
happen.
this.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I had that, and I was like, oh, it's going to be so heartbreaking if he spends all these years with this guy, and then like if he kills himself and he leaves him in a note that's like he hated him the whole time.
yeah.
I was like, oh man, that's going to break my heart. Luckily, it went in a different way.
It's like
Another
it's going to make me
heartbreaking way.
emotional, but also the end that they give us is emotional. You're like, it doesn't
Even
matter
more
what
emotional,
direction
just
they
for different
went.
reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah, because you have that, like, when they first get together, and then it's like it jumps like 2 years, and they're arguing. And you're like, oh no, it's starting already.
yeah,
Where
and then
they're
it cuts like 3 years later,
Yep.
and like, I mean, they're arguing about, because like you mentioned before, like he wants to have some form of sense of normalcy. He wants to like redo some of the shops around the little town, or
Yep.
put paint up and redo different like houses or rooms and stuff. And just Bill's not about it.
And the great thing is like when one time ends, like for instance, they're arguing about redoing all these shops and stuff. That goes somewhere at the end of the episode. Like it's not like it just
Yeah.
ends. We don't get anything with that, because then you get Frank is talking about in that time frame where he's talking about he wants friends. He wants to invite people in, and it's like,
And he's been talking to a woman on the radio.
Yes, what you find out is Tess. And so then you see a scene where they're all eating. It's Tess, Joel, Bill, and Frank, and they're having a nice meal. And Tess and Frank are kind of probably the closer friends. They go off and have their conversation, and then you have the awkward conversation with Bill, where Joel understands. Joel's just not as shut. I mean, Joel is almost as shut down as Bill. He's a little bit more open, I think, probably more with Tess because he's more comfortable with Tess, and it's the same way with Bill. With Frank, that's when they open up. Like Joel is not very open other than with Tess, and now that Tess is gone, he's kind of shutting down, but Ellie's sort of opening him up. And that so if you look at it, Joel and Bill are very similar to each other in the show.
Yeah. He knows he can understand where he comes from.
Yeah.
Like, he's a stranger. And I love like when it cuts to them and they're having that little like brunch or whatever. Everything's all like normal. They're talking, and it like shows Bill, and he's just sitting there with the gun pointed at him.
I was like, put the gun away, Bill.
Sitting there, like, come on, Bill. Even whenever they walk away, it's just him and Joel. He's still holding the gun.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Get the gun out of my face. Come on, man.
But then at the end of that, you get Joel telling Bill about the fence. Well, no, he tells him about the fence during the meal. And then when they're about to leave,
those aren't going to last like another year or two. Like, we can get you supplies that'll last you a lifetime. Like, you gotta help me help you.
Yeah, and then they're about to leave, and he's like, "Are you sure? Like, I can get you stuff." And he's like, "We'll be fine." And then literally the next scene is Raiders coming to try to get in.
And he told him,
and and Bill is laying waste on all these guys. Like the fact that these couple guys are just getting flamethrower, like dudes are on fire, running around, shocked by the fence. Yeah. And then this was probably the only scene I was kind of like, I wish we got a little bit more, where Bill gets shot. Frank brings him in, and clearly they must all be dead because no one else comes. Because like Frank is not even worrying about anyone outside. He's just like, I'm focusing on you. And
he was already up too. Like when Frank wakes up in the middle of night to everything, like Bill's already outside.
Oh yeah,
like, he's already fighting with him. Like he knew what was happening.
He's always ready. Because like, I mean, we didn't even talk about when we first meet Bill. He's in his basement. The whole town is getting evacuated, and Bill is in like a sub basement because the Fedra has to come in, and they go through like the entire house to make sure there's no one in there.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Just that scene leading up to there.
When we see
Ellie and Joel find the pit of all the all the skeletons and stuff, and they were talking like even the people that weren't infected were getting killed because they didn't have any room for them in these, the quarantine zones or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to like, it shows like those blankets, and then it cuts to like all those years ago, and it shows that mother and the child, and I'm like, oh no, and they're taking them away. But yeah, I love that scene though. Bill's just hanging out there, and it shows exactly what he does when the end of the world happens. It's great. It's
so fun. And this is when this was a scene that was put in by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann to kind of show, hey, this is why we're not doing the spores thing. because this is what characters are going to look like with the gas masks on. You're not going to be able to see them. And a big reason why, just side note, that the gas masks aren't used in the show and the spores thing was removed was because they didn't want to put another mask on Pedro Pascal because he's already the Mandalorian and has to wear a helmet. So they're like, we can't do it again to him. Like, so that's why.
Yeah, and I saw like he was saying like it doesn't make much sense for the spores because like in the games they're contained to like these small areas, whereas in like real life they would spread out everywhere. Spores would be everywhere. You pretty much have to wear a mask at all times. Or it's like doesn't really translate well.
It was always in certain dark rooms in a building.
Yeah, exactly. Like that doesn't really work like that.
And so yeah, back to the the Raider scene where he's Frank is patching him up, and you're like, oh, are they gonna kill Bill here? Like, is he gonna die?
I thought so. The way they ended the scene where he was just not blinking, it looked like he died. And I was like, no way, they're just gonna kill Bill like this.
I was like, damn, this so Frank is gonna be the survivor here. They're gonna do the whole switcheroo, but then they're
gonna switch it up.
Yeah, then they cut like 10 years later, and Bill's fine, but Frank he's got ALS.
Yeah, Frank's in a rough spot.
Yeah, it's always tough to see stuff like this, especially like you haven't seen this character for very long, but you kind of grown attached to Frank because of the fact of what he's done for Bill throughout the episode and kind of taking him out of his shell. And
especially like the one that stands out is whenever he surprises him with the strawberries he planted, and just that kind of giggle laugh that he has when they take that bite. I'm like, oh, it's so cute, and like they just bond, and they're the perfect couple, and then you have that heartbreaking scene, man, like with Frank.
Yeah, but I have to point out that it made me laugh when like they eat the strawberry and then like they're about to fool around and it's like, not on the strawberries.
Not on the street. Don't squash them.
I was like, move over. Plenty of grass here.
But even like whenever that scene where he gets shot, whenever he's like, he has a list. He's telling Frank like, you got to do these things. Like call Joel, and it shows how much like he cares like about them now. It's like call Joel. Joel knows what to do. He'll take care of you. And then like he knows that he wants him to live, so he's just like listening. He's like, okay, what's next? He's just trying to keep him awake, trying to keep him talking to him while he's like patching him up a little bit. But like every scene, it's just a different scene of them bonding, or like that one part they were fighting. They're going through pretty much everything you would have in a relationship over the course of how many years. It's great, and it's only like an hour like episode. And they cover so much.
You're just like so attached to this character you're never going to see again. And you're just, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And that's probably the most heartbreaking scene is whenever they're talking there after they wake up.
The fact that they give Frank ALS in this as something, it shows the audience that, hey, even though the world is, we're going through the biggest pandemic you could probably ever go through, there's still those other things that can affect people, because they were even talking about, Bill's trying to comprehend the whole situation, because Frank is pretty much like, hey, I want to do this. And he's just like, no. And he's like, well, today's my last day. Like today is going to be my last day. And you're just like, come on, man.
Yeah. And then when he's telling him all the stuff he wants to do, bro, I'm getting teary just thinking about it. Like I was on the verge of crying during that scene where he's just saying like, I want to do this. I want you to like, we're going to pick out suits. We're going to get married. And then we're going to have dinner and you're going to mix all these pills in with my drink. And then, and that'll be it. And I'm like, oh man, no. Like,
but Bill's trying,
just his response too.
Yeah. And Bill's trying to figure, there's gotta be some other ways. Like this is literally a disease that they had no cure for before this all went down. So it's there's no end. Like I don't want to live like this anymore. Like I want to spend my last day with the person I love the most. And so then we get to see the entire day, them going, and there's no dialogue up until the dinner, which I thought was really good, of them going to the boutique, and then they go to, which was something that reflected earlier. If he wasn't able to redo all those shops, we wouldn't get this type of thing at the end.
There is payoff for it.
And then they have the dinner. and if you notice, it's the same exact dinner, the first dinner,
Mhm.
with the same wine, and then they have another glass of wine with, he crushes up the pills, and they both have a glass, and then Frank figures out that Bill put pills inside the bottle too, so that Bill
Yeah.
would die with him. And I was like, oh, like at first I
Rough.
was like, oh man, Bill's, if this is the case, like Bill's not gonna meet Ellie. We're not gonna get a Bill
Yeah.
Ellie interaction, but I like the direction it went because we got Ellie and Joel showing up at the house later, and you find out, they're looking through the house, and the only door that's locked is the bedroom. And
Yeah.
Joel hasn't read the letter yet before he gets it, but he can't get into that one room.
Yeah, it's like barricaded or something.
Yeah, and
But them doing that, like Bill, you know, committing like pretty much committing suicide with him, along with that note, is really what sets up kind of the relationship between Ellie and Joel though
yep.
for the rest of the series. And I feel like and I see so many like comments on Twitter or Facebook or whatever saying like this episode meant nothing in the long run. It has like impact on Joel and Ellie's story. I'm like, I don't understand how you can watch this and get that. Cuz I feel like this has a huge importance on there, and that's why Joel really looks at Ellie the way that he does going forward through the rest of the series or games or whatever, where he develops that bond with her and looks out after her as like a father figure and everything.
Yeah, we see him kind of smile a little bit as they're driving away, and they're listening to the song that was played earlier, and she doesn't know who it is, and I was like, I'm with you, Ellie. I don't know who this is either. I know an S10 though. I know those great. I just love it. Joel's like, that's just to me. This is just a shitty Chevy S10. I was like,
oh, they are pretty spaceship.
Yeah. So,
but I love like when she's reading the letter too. That one line about like they'll run into my traps or whatever, and there's like, like she even puts the laughs in there.
Yeah, but you have the moment that the line where it talks about protecting Tess, and she doesn't want to read it. And so Joel ends up reading it. And it's one of those things where even though Ellie and Joel haven't gotten off on the right foot, like clearly Ellie knows better than to say something that's going to really affect him. Because then she tries to talk about Tess, and he's just like, we're going to have some rules here. We never talk about Tess. And she's like, okay, that's fine. That's cool. I love the whole shower thing too, where she's like, I'm going to take a shower. And he's like, you need to take a shower too.
But like that even goes back to the very beginning of the episode when they're camping out in the woods, when she's like, she goes to talk to him and he's like, I don't want to hear like your apologies or whatever. And she's like, I'm not going to apologize. I just don't want you to blame me for something that's not my fault. Like this was all like your decision. You and Tess made a decision to take me out and go out this way. Like this isn't my fault. So stop treating me like it is, it's like, and I like that. And it kind of comes back around at the end of the episode there with the note and everything.
Yeah. We didn't really talk about the beginning of this episode. They go to a Cumberland Farms. And that hits me hard because there's Cumberland Farms everywhere where I live. I was like, hey, I know that place. But yeah,
I did not. I didn't even get it.
Don't worry. We just recorded
I didn't know it was a real place.
We just recorded an episode and I mentioned it, and Dan and Angela are like, what? What's a Cumberland Farms? They're in Massachusetts, all right? The Northeast is where they mostly are. But they go there because Joel has like a stash there, and Ellie actually
trying to locate it.
Yeah, Ellie just doesn't believe that he knows what he's doing. What are you doing? Finding my stash? Do you even know where it is? Yeah, it's somewhere.
I forget what the exact phrase he said, but he's like, I'm trying to pinpoint where it's at or something like.
I'm just trying to locate it.
Like it's around here somewhere. Yeah.
But Ellie finds a compartment down in the basement, and she finds. This isn't a clicker. What stage is this? I haven't looked up, but it's like the in between like a stalker and a clicker. It might actually be a stalker because it still has because the cordyceps hasn't fully engulfed its eyes yet. But she cuts it, and then she ends up killing it with her knife.
It's so nasty. Like even like in episode 2 and this episode when they cut open the infect and you see like the spores and like the white stuff underneath the
Yeah.
skin. It's
There's
so
like a
ugh, it's so
mushroom that
gross.
just like pops out. It's like pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh,
It's nasty. It's so nasty.
gross.
But yeah, that's the only. I mean, we see another infected later in the episode when Bill. I love it when he's eating dinner and he gets an alarm that one of his tripwires or there's a infected by the tripwire and it's just like, and then it just gets
Just
shot
blasts his
and
head
he
off.
just laughs and continues to eat.
Never gets old.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. But yeah, and then of course after they go to Joel finds his stuff. They go on they're walking to Bill and Frank's, and Ellie is just like, "Hey, how did all this start?" And
yeah, and that was interesting. They actually had a kind of an explanation for it.
It was it's all flour. It was pretty much like flour and grain.
And bread and stuff.
Yeah,
and it was like in the food, and like if you ate an abundance of the food, that's when you would get sick and infected. It's like that's crazy.
Yeah. So we get that explanation, and then we get the plane shot with the downed plane, and Ellie's all excited. He's like, "Oh, you used to be able to, you got to fly." He's like, "Well, yeah, but you could always be like them."
Yeah, and I like the different viewpoints where she kind of makes it seem like maybe you should be grateful for some of the stuff that you
were
used to
able to
be
do.
able to do.
Yeah,
like you were in the sky, man. Like she says, like come on. It's like yeah, so were they.
Yeah, it's the same with like
way to be a downer, Joel.
Right? And also, I want to go to a convenience store where they just got a friggin' Mortal Kombat 2 cabinet in there.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, whoa.
It's like my friend told me about this.
Melina and stuff. I was like, it's so cool.
It's great. But yeah, back to the end of the episode when
man.
Yeah, they shower, they getting ready, and of course they're in their game attire, which is actually the attire that's on the cover of the PS3 version of the game. It's her with her like palm tree red tee, and then he's got his cool green flannel, which is
I like
fun.
when he comes down, she's like, "Woo, look at you!" Or, like,
he's got the hair,
or like she like cat calls him a little bit, and it was funny because like when they were in the truck and everything, my girl was like, "They just took a shower, but I feel like Joel always still looks dirty."
I mean, in this world, he probably didn't wash very well. He probably got in there.
They had water. They might not have had soap and stuff.
Exactly. No, if Frank's living there, they're making their own soap.
Yeah, exactly. They put down in the basement like some Fight Club stuff.
Yeah. So do we get a time frame between like when Frank and Bill die and when Joel and Ellie show up?
They said that from what I remember in the note, they said like when they signed the note, it was like August of 2023. So it wasn't too long before they got there.
Yeah.
I mean, the fold was just a little bit moldy when they got there and stuff. Like everything wasn't like the lights were still on and everything. I don't know. It didn't seem like it was too long after they died.
Yeah. I even in the note, Bill puts down the fact that they opened the window. Or he opened the window to the room
so it didn't stink.
So it didn't smell. But he's like, you probably won't want to come in because the sight is probably not going to be good.
He just said, please don't come into this room.
Yeah. And
I like how they were respectful about that too. Because then deep in my mind, I was like, are they going to show them? Are they going to be like decomposing or something?
But
they were
last
respectful
shot
about it.
I was like, either you don't show it, which is what they ended up doing, or you show them in a gnarly state in an embrace, which could have been both. But I like that they didn't show the bodies. Unless
I think it could have worked either way, but I think the way they did it worked better. And
Joel and Ellie, they drive off, and we get do we want to talk about did you see the teaser for the next episode? Like what's gonna happen?
It's gonna be a doozy this next episode.
It looks the one shot that really gets you, because this is something that really reflects on the beginning of the show and the beginning of the game, is when they encounter a raider that's like pretending to be hurt. And then and Ellie's like, oh, we gonna save, he's hurt, are we gonna save him? And Joel's like, no. And it's very reflective of the beginning of the show when they're driving towards wherever they're getting out of the city, and there was the car that was pulled over to the side of the road, and people were asking for help and Tommy's like,
Yeah.
oh, we should pick them up. And Sarah was saying the same thing. And Joel's like, no, keep driving.
Yeah.
So it's very
We
much
gotta
like,
take care of
I
ourselves.
have a job, even though I think as we're getting farther and farther into the story, it's not a job anymore. She is his, full responsibility. And so he's going to
Yeah.
protect her any way he can. And so, yeah, he knows how this world works. He's been involved, he's been around, but even before everything went down. So he's seen some
Yeah.
shit.
And just like earlier in the episode where he even asks like to see her bite, he's like, cover that up. Don't show anybody.
Yeah.
You can't speak a word to this to anybody because it doesn't matter if you're not infected. As soon as somebody sees the bite, they're going to try to kill you. Like you're going to try to like remove it. And it's the way the world is at that point, but it seems like with Fedra and everything else within that city, it's going to be a huge episode. Like I'm sure we're going to be getting, what is it? Sam and his brother, or I forget the other. They're going to be coming up soon too.
Yeah, I can't remember what his brother's name is, but I do know that this is another character that they've changed significantly from the game. Not significantly, but they made him a little bit different.
How did they change it? Do you know?
So from what I've seen is that Sam is blind. Or he's either blind or deaf, which I know he wasn't in the game. He was just a little boy.
Are they still brothers?
Yes. Yeah. It's him and his brother, but I think the younger one is either blind or deaf. So that's like the little.
So I mean,
no, he's
deaf.
He's deaf because I remember seeing the kid on the red carpet. And he was doing signs. So he's actually deaf in real life. So they just made the character.
Just wanted to add another layer to make it even more
heartbreaking.
Eventually, yeah,
we won't talk any farther because we're more knowledgeable about the game, so we know the things that happen in the game and what we're probably going to see on the screen.
I love
going forward.
Neil Druckmann's tweet. I don't know if you saw that after the episode because everybody was talking about it.
I saw so many tweets.
What are you guys crying about? Yeah. But he was like, what are you crying about? This was the happy episode. I was like, oh, great.
But to be honest, as much as a lot of people, of course, probably were tuned out because it wasn't a very action-packed episode. And a lot of people, that's what kind of drives them into these type of shows is kind of just the action aspect. But I thought it was so well done. And it really gave you a better appreciation for a character that in the game, Bill's a good character, but once you get past him, it's like you forget about him. Like I think Bill and Frank are going to stick with you throughout this entire show, even if they have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I think they definitely did the character justice. I think they did a little bit better for him than they did in the game. Like in the game, you kind of know who he is. I mean, he's still alive, but you never really like see or hear about him ever again. Whereas like this one, it's like you had closure with him, and it was a story that has impact to it. And I think it kind of works with us because we are fans of the games. We know what to expect, not as far as like what the story is, but I mean as far as like how it's paced a little bit. Like everybody knows that it's kind of like an zombie apocalypse type story. So they're expecting a bunch of zombie action and crazy set pieces where it's like, it's more so about the characters and following these characters and what happens to them and following their story. It's not as much about the zombies in the long run.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's
why I like episodes like these, though.
Yeah,
it's great. Just the strong character moments.
It's not like a lot of people would be like, "Oh, this is just a filler episode," and I was like, "This isn't a filler episode. It has aspects that do connect to the expanding story that we're getting. It's not like, listen, I'll say an example because we've talked about it on the show. Is when we went through Halo. There are 2 episodes that were literally just there to be there. They had nothing. They did not impact anything else in the rest of the season. And that's a filler episode where there's no impact to what happens in those episodes where this has an impact. Yes, you get some more information, at least for, the people who enjoyed the game. We got to see a character who was very minimal and they expanded on it. And I think they did a very good job with it.
Yeah, I mean, without that note, it probably doesn't kind of open Joel's eyes, like in the long run. Like, kind of find something you care about in the world and take care of it. There's not much in this world, so you got to find something to kind of lock onto. And I mean, that thing was Tess, but there's somebody else in his life that he has to, kind of watch over. And I mean, that's what sets up for the rest of the story and how their character arc goes.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's about it for this episode. We will be back next week to talk about episode 4. I don't know who I'm going to have on yet, but we'll have somebody else. Maybe it'll be Wyatt again. Well, who knows?
Hey,
we'll
who
see.
knows?
We'll see.
Should be an action-packed episode.
It's gonna be a great time. But Wyatt, please tell us where we can find you, what you got going on over there at Cinema Trip Reviews.
Yeah, everybody can find me on Cinema Trip Reviews on Twitter and on Instagram, and pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. We mainly do the show on YouTube. We have a video version. We have The Last of Us. We're doing reviews of that amongst other movie reviews as well. We actually just announced our new show that's going to be premiering here in a couple weeks, where we are going to be chronologically reviewing every superhero comic book movie, starting with Batman the movie from 1966. So we have a long trek ahead of us, but I am very excited to get down to the nitty-gritty and start working on it.
Very excited for that. I saw that on Twitter and I was like, ooh boy, got a long journey ahead of you.
Hey, man, I would love to have you on a couple of the episodes too.
Let me know. I am down.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All of the links for Cinema Trip Reviews will be down in the description. You can find us, of course, at Dissect That Film wherever on all the social medias. And I mean, if you're listening to us or watching us, you know where to find us. But make sure to leave us a rating and review on whatever podcast service you listen to us on, or like, share, and subscribe if you're watching the video on YouTube. And make sure to check out our newest podcast episode, which is coming out on Friday, where we're talking about 1992's Alien 3.
Oh,
it's a good one because there are 2 very drastic versions of that movie. And
yeah,
everybody in the show I watched one version and Dan and Angela watched the other. So there is some, you get down to the nitty gritties of the differences between both cuts. So it's a lot of fun. So make sure to check that out on Friday. And yeah, we'll be back next week to talk about episode 4 of The Last of Us. It's been a lot of fun. And until next time, I am Brett Parker. That is Wyatt of Cinema Trip Reviews. And this has been another episode of Slice of TV. We'll see y'all again next time. Bye-bye.